I will turn it back over for a small segment. Right about 8 o'clock, I'll go into lecture, and then we'll in class. Yes, sir.
Hi. Yeah, I have a special guest here, Joe Simonson, who is a media critic for the Daily Caller, and he's someone I think that's very versed in modern communication and digital communication. I'll turn it over to Joe. I think he's going to do really well.
Great. Thanks, John. All right. Hi. Yeah. So my name is Joe Simonson. I currently live in Manhattan, and I work at the Daily Caller as a columnist and reporter there. That's based in Washington, D.C. I work out of New York. Just a little bit about the Daily Caller. It was founded in 2010 with Neil Patel, who was a chief assistant to Dick Cheney in the Bush White House, and Tucker Carlson, who I'm sure a lot of you already know, who now has a show on Fox. Neil Patel currently serves as the publisher, and Tucker took a step back after he got a show at Fox and still has an advisory role there. We get tens of millions of unique views a month. We're one of the top digital publishers on the right and in the digital news space generally. The site is currently profitable, which not a lot of people can say. Before the Caller, I worked at News Corp to work for a short-lived project there called Heat Street. Don't expect anyone there here to know that. Which lasted for about 2 years. During that project, I helped basically build a site from scratch, providing content and marketing strategy during that. And before then, I worked in a more traditional media role at the New York Post in the opinion section. And basically, throughout my years of experience here, I've gotten a taste of kind of the old traditional media, print, legacy publications that's moving into more of a digital space, a more startup environment at News Corp, and then now a more established online-only publication. So I'm going to talk for around 10 to 15 minutes, and I just want to give you my general impressions of the media landscape, and I hope to answer any questions or discuss any topics after I'm done. So as I'm sure many of you know, the media industry is going through an era of basically mass uncertainty, both from a consumer standpoint and from advertisers, which are here too, obviously, is where you get revenue and money from. The business model of print remains in steep decline. I'm sure all of you, like I said, know that. So basically every print publication is heavily pivoting towards digital and online stuff. Again, news, for example, the New York Times digital subscriptions now vastly outpace their print subscriptions. Their digital revenue will soon overtake that of their print if it hasn't already. You can double check me on that. I wouldn't be surprised if it had. So the business models for these new business models for these companies presents new opportunities as well, but also some limitations. One of the limitations is now consumer choice. It's not just you get your local paper, you go to so you get your local paper, which are now basically going extinct, and if you want more national coverage, you go to the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal or something like that. Also, with the decline of print, basically your advertising revenue is going to shrink. Print advertising can be really expensive. Now you have more digital advertising, which is way cheaper. There's even a question whether how effective digital advertising even is. So that also, again, demands a much less price on the end of advertisers. It's like pennies on a click. So with that, things like SEO, search engine optimization, direct marketing remain crucial for these media companies. Things as basic as if you go to an online article, look at the URL, you're going to see keywords. That's how you become more relevant on Google and Facebook and stuff like that. So really even basic stuff like that is how people are trying to generate income online. In terms of communication, different platforms try to communicate a different brand. So again, like I said earlier, you didn't have as many options, but with the rise of cable news kind of started that and became much more important in the age of the internet. The best example of that is Fox News. Before Fox News, you basically just had the networks. You had CNN and MSNBC came around the same time. But basically, the joke, old story is of Roger Ailes, who helped start Fox News. Someone said, how are you going to compete with the networks, ABC and the nightly news and stuff like that, who's your audience going to be? Roger Ailes said, half the country. And so the general breakdown, so basically from there I'm going to just break down where I see what these kind of like new brands and basically various images that groups of publications try to project through different categories of like the online media ecosystem. So you basically the straight legacy media brands. These are things like networks, like I just said, the CBS, ABC, now Fox, but also the traditional paper outlets like the New York Times, Washington Post, and Wall Street Journal, magazines like The Atlantic, programs outside the nightly news like 60 Minutes, kind of news magazine, TV magazine type programs. And so these outlets basically, they're trying to project an image of, we're giving you just the facts and only the facts, we're the truth. So you have all this noise on the internet now, but if you can turn on the ABC nightly news, you know you're gonna get it straight. You see this in branding like Washington Post now. What's their new brand? Democracy dies in darkness. So they're now taking on like a social role on top of that as well. And again, New York Times, again, full page ad saying, where is truth? Where is truth? The truth is at the New York Times. You see this in the editorial focus in magazines like The Atlantic, constantly pushing this idea, Time Magazine as well. This country is in a crisis, democracy is in a crisis. Where do I learn about this crisis that we're supposedly in? You go to The Atlantic, you go to Time Magazine, it'll make you feel better and help you understand it. And these brands are really effective at what they do. Again, we had some from CNN on talking, and all these companies are pushing lots and lots of dollars into digital, which is a great thing to do because, like I said, the returns in digital are not high, but you're starting to see that just now in the last 5 years after like a 10 to 15 year push. For example, CNN Digital is basically the #1 online news outlet in the entire country in terms of clicks. You contrast that with their cable ratings, which are abysmal and terrible. I mean, the average CNN cable news program loses to like Nickelodeon TV shows. So they're obviously very much pivoting away. They're doing a lot more hires, a lot more investment in digital. Cable's always going to be there, but they know where the future is. And you're seeing a lot more as well. Fox is now catching up. When I was at the New York Post, the editor-in-chief before I was there basically ignored their digital and their website his entire tenure, and they're playing catch up the entire time. And other publications, like if you guys have Snapchat or Instagram, you see things like the Daily Mail. Daily Mail is a British tabloid that's print circulation is in deep decline. The Daily Mail is like the #1 online news source in the world. It's a British tabloid full of just like sex stories, teacher sex, stuff like that. Guy loses his arm. That's the #1 in the world, in America and in Europe. So again, it just kind of tells you, who's focusing on what, how are people grabbing their attention. People who are paying attention to that kind of stuff, they're getting huge returns on those kind of investments. So then we have another category, and so I mentioned Fox earlier, the Ailes quote, who's your audience, half the country. So now that we have this category of, CNN's, New York Times, the Washington Post, we're the good guys, right? We have all these other outlets, which include the Wall Street Journal opinion section, Breitbart, Daily Caller, Federalist, Fox, on the right, and both these, all these outlets, do a lot of rewriting of news stories and original reporting, but their whole brand identity is, we're what those guys aren't telling you. And that's really important, particularly in the age of social media, because when you look at who's sharing what on Facebook, Facebook is skewing older, as we all know. But to give an example, during the Kavanaugh hearings, where were if you did a keyword search of Ford, Dr. Ford, or Kavanaugh, 4 out of the 5 most shared interacted sources or articles came from a conservative or right-leaning outlet or online personality. That's surprising because, you know, when you think of news, or when your average person might think of news, you think, like I said, CNN, New York Times, but that's not necessarily the case in social media. Only one out of that 5 did not come from a right-leaning outlet, but it came from basically a Facebook-only page called Occupy Democrats. It wasn't taken up by someone like a CNN or New York Times or even like a more progressive outlet like the New Republic. It was just some guy who has a Facebook page and has millions of fans. It wasn't taken up by like a left-leaning news outlet. And like I said, that's attractive to people because there's so much distrust of media on the right and even on the left that people like identifying with those outlets that like telling you, we're giving you what you aren't hearing, and you kind of have something above everyone else, right? You know what everyone else doesn't get. And so just as a brief aside, talking about Facebook, you know, you're interested in digital media, Facebook is the dominant factor in digital media. It's the cornerstone of any marketing or revenue strategy. It has the power to decide what publications die, what publications don't. There is a very popular digital news site called rare.us. If you haven't heard of it, that's fine. It had tens of millions of uniques a month. It was kind of a libertarian-leaning news outlet. Facebook, about 6 months ago, changed its algorithm completely and what shows up in your news feed. It said we're going to shift away from, you know, kind of like page content, you know, or like content, to shift more to like who you're friends with, what they're posting. Basically, like 3 weeks after Facebook made that change, Rare went out of business. They had to fire everyone. And even at the Daily Caller, every news outlet, we're readjusting. You know, our traffic has recovered, but when that happened, I mean, everyone across the media landscape was panicking because basically Facebook is its own publisher at this point, and every news outlet has to follow their lead, and we don't know what their lead is all the time. So that's another one. So we have, just to recap, we have the legacy media brands, we have the people on the right, and then now we also have just straight clickbait sites. You know, the first thing that comes to mind is like BuzzFeed. A lot of these outlets tend to focus on social justice issues, viral issues, or even just things like cooking, those cooking videos you see on Facebook. And these people generally grab, you know, individuals who aren't maybe engaged in the day-to-day stuff that's going on in Washington, but they're also really effective at still grabbing eyeballs. When you look at these videos, some of them get millions and millions and millions of views, and that translates to real advertising dollars. You know, if you can get 2 million, 3 million views on just like a 5-minute video, you've beaten a lot of cable shows. And that's really impressive. It doesn't cost that much. There's like no cost. You can film it in a closet, put it on a Facebook page, and really start breaking in dollars. And like I said, BuzzFeed pioneered this, which is ironic too, because the news division, BuzzFeed News, which they're trying to break away, you know, this BuzzFeed or BuzzFeed News always says, no, we're the serious part. They're in deep trouble. They're only being basically propped up by BuzzFeed. And a lot of these like clickbait sites, BuzzFeed, Upworthy, Thought Catalog, you know, they're getting hundreds of millions of dollars from private equity groups. So there's real money there. Okay, and then there are, so that's another category, clickbait sites. And then there are basically sites and outlets that only really came into, you know, they're more serious, they're more in-depth, but they're only really around because the internet is around. And I'm talking about sites like Vox, Vice. They tend to be millennial-focused, people who are, you know, comfortable using the internet. They stick to topics that people around our age like or are interested in, political views around that demographic. And keep in mind, Vice is a multi-billion-dollar company. It has been valued at over multiple billions of dollars several times by investors. And it started as a Canadian zine in the 90s. And it's nothing like that now. But what's really interesting is that these outlets, like Vox and like Vice, they're still relying on traditional methods to generate money. And what I mean by that is you see Vox, they're getting Netflix shows. That's not really, Netflix, fine, it's basically just a better way to watch TV. It's not really that different. It's not like the internet. You're watching TV on the internet. At the end of the day, it's not that different than just turning on a TV and choosing a channel that you want to watch. Vice, as you probably know, has its own cable channel now. And it's just really interesting when you consider that, because these are two extremely millennial, you think of digital brands, but where are they trying to make the most money? It's through TV and through basic traditional video. And again, a lot of these places as well, they're not basically relying on their own infrastructure. They're going to places like YouTube and basically just trying to get as much advertising dollars from YouTube as they can. It doesn't matter to them that YouTube takes 40%, 40 to 60% of all these advertising dollars. They're still just doing basic, the equivalent of cable TV, just on a different platform. Or even relying on, doing partnerships with like NBC and stuff like that. So they're not totally breaking away from the traditional networks. So just kind of wrap things up a little bit. Unfortunately, general consensus seems to be that we are in a media bubble. The decline of print led to a flooding in of all these different outlets. And it doesn't mean, or it means that probably a lot of them won't succeed. Which a lot of people are hedging against that. A lot of traditional magazines, places like National Review, The New Republic, The Nation, they've had a real difficulty in switching to digital media and the digital landscape, and so they're all basically just propped up now by a handful of wealthy investors. And so one strategy that a lot of these places are doing is they're turning to nonprofit foundations. And this is basically self-explanatory. It cut costs dramatically, but it's also a bit of an admission of defeat. And what these organizations do is they offer like a few educational courses. All their content is free. They might give lectures to the public occasionally. And that's personally where I see the future for a lot of these. If you go grocery store, you see magazines. I think a lot of those, news focused, even like a Time magazine, I think a lot of those will eventually just have to turn to nonprofits to stay afloat. I know we're here to talk about like business communication, like how do we get into these, how do you tap into that market if you're interested and stuff like that. So just breaking away from a little bit of that. One of the other things that's really, really important to kind of what's going on in media is obviously your own personal brand and stuff like that. The number one thing for media, whether it's Hollywood, the news, TV, all that, remains Twitter. And Twitter, if banking relies or marketing and stuff like that relies on LinkedIn, the media industry relies on Twitter. And so it's not just that you build a personal brand there, but you get other people to take you seriously on there as well. And so if people, like the content or the tweets that you're providing, it's helped me get a job before. It's not just like, oh, I like Joe's tweets, let's bring him on, but it's, oh, so-and-so at another publication likes Joe's, he has some credibility now. That's kind of interesting, albeit kind of annoying sometimes, new development, but I figured I'll just throw that in at the end, to see like how does an individual get into the market. So with that, I'll take questions. Sure.
I have a question. You were talking about how the click traffic can generate revenue through advertisements and stuff like that. At a certain point, do you see what the people are clicking on more driving what you present, or do you feel like you still have the freedom to present?
So a lot of what we do, a lot of what people, on the editor side do, or even advertisers do, actually I'm sure you probably know A/B testing. So you basically present two potential headlines or advertisements to different groups that you stake out. And then through that, you try to nail down which one was more popular, and you kind of take it from there. And usually it might be two radically different like formats, like the way they present a headline, whether it's more clickbaity or appeals to something more relevant in the moment, but more serious or something, and then you basically like go off from there. So that's one way. I don't know if that answers your question.
How dangerous do you see curation? Now you have these applications and things that deliver news to you, but anything you search in Google will come back positive if you search it. So,
Oh, I see.
you see what I mean? Because I had a discussion with someone the other day. They tried to prove that point. They went on Google to prove it. And to prove my point, I went on Google to prove it.
Did you get two different
They were
like?
two different things because
Yeah.
the search results will always tell me what I need.
Well-
So for news, if you're telling them the stories that they don't hear, what's your strategy to get to their ear if they're just being curious?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think unfortunately it was just people's behavior, with the rise of cable television and the internet and stuff like that. People are really self-selecting, and so I think on the business end, a lot of people are thinking it would be great if we can, reach people who wouldn't normally hear from us. But I think at the same time, the most effective strategy is to just go to the people that want your content. So in that sense, actually, I don't think curation is necessarily that bad. I mean, I think that's just a reality. I mean, yeah, would I love like people from across the political spectrum to read what I have to say? But there are just, numerous things beyond what Google's providing that person, why they're not going to click on what I'm writing. So I actually think, and I think why I think networks like CNN or the New York Times or where I come from, the Daily Caller or Breitbart or something like that, it's almost more effective to double down. This is who we are, this is the audience that we cater to, and if you don't like it, who cares?
I've always thought just real quick, if news applications would, let's say movies, let's a show like Entourage or something like that, if they could pick a show, or if they looked at different shows and the demographics that they want to get into that might not hear them, and somehow talk to the script writers or something like that to try to say, can you influence in this show, speak about these topics somehow,
that's interesting.
and then someone who doesn't know about it will get interested in it.
Yeah, I mean, I think again that goes back to like how reliant publishers are on Facebook. Facebook ultimately really is a publisher at the end of the day. The news feed is just flipping through the channels. And when I was at News Corp, when we were launching a new site, basically the only way to get your name out there is by using Facebook's data that you pay for. And so that's how you get people to go to your news site. And because it knows what you like, it knows who you are and what your interests are, and it just places ads, sponsored content. So I see what you're saying with Hollywood, which is interesting, but publishers are doing that with Facebook.
So you mentioned developing your own brand, which is technically a little bit different than
Yeah.
your passions.
Yeah.
So I mean, does your passion drive your own brand and thus who you work for, or are you in essence a free agent on the market?
Unfortunately, developing kind of, your brand and getting Twitter followers, being verified and stuff like that, it provides a little bit of security in an area that doesn't have a lot of security right now. And I mean that in the sense that, if I were fired tomorrow, I know that I have, 11,000 people who really, really like me, and that, that's essentially vouches for me in the job market. And so, a lot of time, it's funny. I tweet and run my mouth on Twitter, I can say whatever I want, provide dumb commentary, which is entertaining, but it is kind of like another dimension to the industry that is demanding because you don't want to feel like you're losing relevance. And again, because it provides that security, I think.
You're managing that personal brand. Can
Yeah.
you talk a little bit about, like you said, being relevant?
Yeah.
Being relevant nowadays, I guess, is more important than anything. Your resume can speak volumes, but if you don't have that type of appeal, you might not get in.
Oh yeah, no. Like I said, I got the job at Daily Caller because people liked me on Twitter. mean, that got me in the door.
What are the baby steps that you took to build that up? I mean, I guess by nature.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it just comes down to, you know, I've freelanced for a variety of outlets, and so you get people who say I like their work. A lot of it just comes down to, you know, being insightful and funny, you know, and saying people, I'm not saying I'm that, but I'm saying, like, you know, you want to create that impression, and you want people saying, because people aren't just, you know, opening up the paper every morning, a lot of people are just logging on Twitter, who do I go for, you know, for analysis or what's going on in the world? And you want to basically convince as many people that you're one of those people.
See, and I guess, and Professor Chakowski, that's a big thing for me because, like, you a journalist, so you write things.
Yeah.
You can freelance, but you have something to show. You have a portfolio of what represents you. If you work for something like finance or a big firm or in marketing, and these projects aren't yours, how do you begin to build that? You know, and how do you freelance something like that? How do you freelance your financial talent or your?
I call it archive branding. So what you want is a track record over the last, say, 3 to 5 years of tweets, pins, posts, likes, shares, and comments, metadata, that validate what you say in the interview to be true. So when you say, I've been immersed in finance, financial algorithm, deep, dark pools, and or whatever it is that you're trying to propose that you have knowledge in that few people do, but then they look at a track record of tweets that are consistent with what you say, where you've been retweeting thought leaders and posting high-level content, posting out, seeking alpha blogs or whatever it is that you're doing, then all of a sudden you have more credibility beyond what they can see from your past work positions.
Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely true, and you see it on Twitter all the time. Yeah, people who are working marketing, you know, basically just creating like an ecosystem of feedback and stuff like that. You know, comments, you know, if you read, Seeking Alpha or some other economics blog, you know, Marginal Revolution or something, and, you know, just basically giving your brief feedback. It shows you're engaged, and I think a lot of people like that. It shows that you're more human, you know, a little bit than just another applicant. I mean, just a quick anecdote. I remember I was applying for a job at the Wall Street Journal about a year and a half ago. I was meeting with like Getter, one of the top editors there, and we're talking, and, you know, he goes, you know, so I saw that you tweeted something on X, and it was, you know, it was a political tweet, and, you know, it basically didn't look like it totally lined up with the editorial line of the journal. And I didn't really have an answer for it. And, you know, I tried talking my way out of it, but it never really occurred to me that, oh man, a month ago, because I made some comment, you know, New Deal, that, you know, it would come back to me in an interview setting. And I think if you are going to step into that, you know, being really active in social media, you gotta be careful. You know, you should really think about, what am I trying to project here?
You mentioned the word journalist, but I think that is a breed that is very hard to find these days. For me, actually, no disrespect, but it painted a very dark picture of the, you know, the communication world out there. So it seems like, you know, people just give you what you want to hear rather than just reporting things. It's very unfortunate.
Yeah, no, but that's where we are, and I think it started with cable news. It's not just the internet, and, you know, the guy from CNN, you know, he talked about how it's an academic setting, and I mean I couldn't disagree more. I mean, the news is entertainment at this point. People go to the news because they want to be entertained. And no one is thinking that there's a scholarly environment when they turn on CNN. I'm sorry. And I don't think that when they turn on Fox either. And I know that's how the producers think at CNN.
It's debatable.
It's debatable, but, you know, you go on CNN right now, you're not reading, you know, an academic journal. It's salacious stuff. It's what are our readers, what's going to get them going, we're going to get on, who's going to be yelling at the TV. You know, we want to create debates, we want to create tension, we want to, you know,
I disagree with that. I mean, there is a role for serious journalism, and the fact that some fraction of the people want salacious journalism doesn't mean that there shouldn't be actual research, and there shouldn't be some, proper stuff going on. And just like we have to cater to an audience. Yes, you make money, but that's not journalism. There is reporting and there's journalism. And so I think you need to figure out, are you a journalist, or are you just going to cater and make money for your organization? So I think that's where it's a personal choice. So I can't say, well, just because my bottom line is this, I'm going to just create news, which is what Breitbart and other people do, and that's because I'm getting the most number of likes. That is not reporting. That's not serious journalism.
Well, there's certainly an interesting point there. I mean, I don't want to get in a whole, debate about what I think some people are doing at certain places. You're absolutely right that there are numerous serious journalists out there at New York Times, at places like CNN, all across the country. And, when I said that CNN is meant to be entertaining, the news is meant to be entertaining, that is a general statement, which I do believe is true. That doesn't mean that the people underneath, the people ultimately making the decisions, aren't serious journalists. Reason why CNN, in the context of cable news, which is its own thing, cable news, we can disagree, is not it's not the same quality as like you might say the New York Times is.
No, but don't you think a journalist has a responsibility of standing by what he's writing, not just?
Well, of course. I mean, I stand by. Absolutely. I mean, I stand by.
That's a personal choice, and unfortunately, a lot of people are sort of tending to go in the light way just to entertain. News can be entertaining, but news also can change the face of what's happening.
And you're absolutely right. And
take responsibility.
I don't think any journalist would tell you they don't stand by anything they write. I think if you look at, do a really basic example, I read the New York Times. The New York Times, the people who work there, you look at their opinion section. The opinion section has a top-down line, for example. And the opinion section is on the left because its readers are generally on the left, and it's giving their readers what they want to hear. The New York Times isn't doing a left-wing opinion section because, I felt like being a liberal today. It's a combination that liberals work there and liberals read it. But again, I completely agree with you that there are dozens, if not more, serious journalists. I'm saying in the macro sense, people who are looking at how do we make money, which is important. You can't hire journalists if you're not making money. That is, I think, people are kind of doubling down. Like I said, it's not a coincidence that Donald Trump is elected. Washington Post reveals a new slogan, democracy dies in darkness. Was it dying all, the 100 whatever years Washington Post was around? No, it's a deliberate marketing strategy. It's not a coincidence New York Times says, we're the paper of truth now, right after Donald Trump was elected. Well, were you not before? No, of course they were. It's a marketing strategy, and that's all I mean by that.
Joe, just I think I bring a lot of this together.
As a final point.
Yeah, final point. Because I've worked in media and stuff like that, and to Alex's point and to both of you guys' point, I think, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think what you're saying, or at least what I'm saying, is the nature of broadcast has changed. When it used to be the three big networks, it was truly broadcast. When cable comes out there and all that shelf space, you can get much more niche audiences, and you play to those niche audiences. And what I've done with my YouTube channel, without putting myself in the story, I always went broad with it, and I knew there was advantages and disadvantages to it. I knew it was a long play. And so now on cable, you can have things like the animal channel, and the cooking channel, and the do-it-yourself channel and stuff. And if you just double down to those niches, that's how you build yourself up, particularly in the social media space where you have to get energy and people to like and to share and to do this and that. With social media and digital media, it's unlimited shelf space. So now you have all those things going out there, and you can have a reporter like Joe who works for one publication but writes for 5 or 6 different publications, or an anchor on CNN who's trying to build their personal brand and maybe going a little bit out there and stepping out of what a normal journalist would do because they're looking at a bigger play and how do I get that next mega contract and be a commentator, because there's much more money in being a commentator than being a journalist. So all these things are in play, and I think the last thing, when Joe says that, like even with my own stuff, when you step out there to build that personal brand, you're going to take the arrows, and you have to be willing to take that risk, because it's not riskless. If you want to be that banker or that lawyer or whatever and just hide behind the brand, nothing wrong with that, and be, the partner or the managing director or whatever, then you're facing that brand. But when you decide you're going to be a personal brand, it's on you. So.
Okay, well, with that.
Joe, thank you for joining us. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's never easy representing your own communication ethic in an authentic voice that is, by design, partisan. And I thought what you did was commendable in announcing your background and yet offering an overall landscape of communication media without really putting anyone in a defensive mode. And in some ways, that is very good tactic and modulated communication. I appreciate that very much.
Thank you.